What is up, everyone? Brandon Ferst, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. Welcome into another edition of the NFL Weekly here on the network. We break down everything that is going on in, of course, the world of the NFL as we get closer to the first full weekend of football. As we are going to be diving into the NFC East, my jurisdiction, if you will. Of course, we have the two gurus with me to help me break it all down. We'll introduce first Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Raider Jim at Raider Jim 1090. Mr. Martinez, how you doing today, sir?
Doing well. It's another great summer Wednesday afternoon, and we're going to talk NFL, and we are less than a month away from the opening game, so I can't wait.
Yeah, it's the time for speculation and all that is over. I think more than any sport, any of the four major sports, the NFL turnover for rosters is the most, more than any others, at least as a whole. So it's going to be put an end to all the speculation. Everyone's played at least one preseason game now, so you at least have somewhat of an idea to look forward to. Moving on to Coach Brandon Lupian. You can find Coach at Portland 76er on Twitter. Coach Lupian, how you doing tonight, sir?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Doing quite well. It's another wonderful Wednesday talking NFL with my guys, and just as Raider Jim alluded to, we're less than a month away, and I think we're all ready for kickoff to happen. So, it's a good day.
Amen. And it's nice because if you're a San Diego Padre fan or a team of just a bad baseball team, there's something else to look forward to. Unfortunately, the Padres have hit a bit of a snag, and as every San Diegan knows, it's the inevitable shift from baseball to football a little later than usual, but I think it's coming these days. But anyways, I'll deal with that on the change up next week. Looking ahead to, of course, the NFL. It is the NFC East. As always, we will start at the expected bottom. And yeah, I'm up. The Philadelphia Eagles, according to Bovada, and I'll just make it known now, these odds are very volatile. They're kind of all over the place. Feel free to, I'm referencing OddsShark, and I'll be quoting these odds from Bovada, but OddsShark is a great place for you to go and kind of see all the odds from all the major sports books right there. But the NFC East, the numbers are all over the board. But according to Bovada, the Philadelphia Eagles at the moment are plus 500 or 5-1 to win this division. It's been an offseason of as much turnover as you can have while still holding on to your general manager, as obviously Howie Roseman is still at the helm. This drama, this craziness really started 2 years ago when the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts. Kind of shocked everyone when they drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round, and immediately put pressure on Carson Wentz. And then a snowball effect of injuries and loss of either talent or lack of talent at certain skill position, at certain skill positions, I should say. Forced Carson Wentz into some tough spots. Carson definitely made a lot of mistakes himself. And then, of course, they go to Jalen Hurts. And then we end up to the last game of the season where, look, if you listen to last year's podcast, the last week of the season, the Eagles had no chance. I said the Eagles should lose this game, get a better draft pick. And that's what the Eagles did. The way they did it, it was very obvious in terms of sitting Jalen Hurts for the second half of that game. There were a lot of people who were mad. But it ended up working out. But at the end of the day, many believe it cost Doug Peterson his job. And that was the other kind of head to roll. We obviously saw Carson Wentz get shipped off to Indianapolis with hopes that he would be turned into a first round pick. With his impending injury, it's going to be a little more difficult to get to that 75 or 70% of snaps taken level for it to be a first round pick. But for the Eagles that are in Philadelphia, for the Eagles that are going to be putting on the midnight green, it is about protecting the young quarterback and giving him all the opportunities to succeed. There's plenty of hopeful talent on this team. When you look at this roster in the skill position areas, you're looking at Jalen Reagor as maybe the veteran of this group, and he's a 22-year-old. We're also looking at Miles Sanders, who, you know, had a great year last year. He's only 24. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is still very, very young. And, you know, without bringing up Justin Jefferson, I'm not going to talk about JJ Arcega-Whiteside, who's 25, and we're still hoping he can pretend to be at least a slot wide receiver at this level. Now, looking on the defensive side of the ball, they have plenty of talent, but can they stay healthy? Obviously, Fletcher Cox is the beast in the middle for these guys, and he's the one who kind of sets the tone on the field and off as well. If they can keep Derek Barnett healthy, if they can get some better production, or at least get some help for Darius Slay so that opposing offensive coordinators can't just ignore Darius Slay's side of the ball, which wasn't really happening, but can happen if Darius Slay does get back to that elite level. There are a lot of question marks in Philadelphia. A last place finish, I don't think is imminent, but I think is a hell of a lot more likely than a division win. But looking ahead, this is obviously a young team, and the biggest thing right now is the progression of Jalen Hurts. Quarterback position is the most important position in all of football. There's no doubt about that. He has to get better. He has to turn into a franchise quarterback because, for better or worse, right now, he is just that. But looking ahead, Nick Sirianni has a lot of work to do, and Howie Roseman does as well, because he will not survive another head coaching change. I can guarantee you that. But we'll pass it over. Raider Jim Martinez, what are your thoughts on the Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah, I do not think that the Eagles are the worst team in the NFC West by any stretch. I think the Giants have that label all wrapped up. What I do think is, and what works against the Eagles, is brand new coach, first time quarterback, you know, working together. It's going to be a very challenging for them. But what is in their favor is they have a pretty decent offensive line. And because they have a decent offensive line, they have a guy that does know how to play quarterback, and they've got a running back who you already mentioned his name, Miles Sanders. They have a lot of good tools out there. And I understand it's a very competitive training camp for the offensive line right now. They got a couple guys, Brandon Brooks and Isaac Seumalo, nursing a couple minor injuries, and they're hoping that they all get back to 100% before the start of the season. But, you know, when you, as I have said, I have this theme, or I've had this theme all along when we do the podcast. I don't care how good, well, I do care how good the quarterback is, but really to get the most out of your quarterback, your running backs, is what kind of guys do you have up front? What about those big workhorses in the front? And if you've got a great, solid offensive line, then you have got what it takes, if you've got enough tools to be competitive. And I think the Eagles definitely have that. They did, you know, Deshaun Jackson, nope. Alshon Jeffrey left. Jalen Mills, of course, left on the defensive side, but they've brought in a couple of guys on the defensive too. They brought in Anthony Harris. They've got Eric Wilson. So they've just signed Steven Nelson. So I think they're making the right moves. You're seeing the right effort there. And like I say, I don't think that this is any stretch the worst team in the NFC West. And I think they're going to surprise some people along the way.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the offensive line, because I kind of forgot to kind of gloss over that, because that was obviously, to kind of piggyback on what Raider Jim has talked about throughout. When the Eagles won the Super Bowl, that was their strength of their team. Brandon Brooks was the best guard in all of football. You had obviously Lane Johnson and Jason Peters at the top of their game. Now, Jason Peters has moved on to Chicago, and now Lane Johnson, obviously few years older and is battling injuries with all that. Now it's on Jordan Mailata, who was a kid who was drafted out of either Australian rules football or rugby. You know, one of those. Obviously didn't play. He learned the game essentially in on the practice squad, things like that. That was about 3 or 4 years ago he was drafted. So it's time for them to hopefully cash in on that investment. Most people expect him to start. He had a funny little quote that after their first preseason game, someone had to remind him that he could take his pads off. It's the first time that, he hasn't had to play the second half in any preseason game. So kind of funny that he's going, oh, okay, cool. Now I'm kind of ready to start now. And the big part of this too is Andre Dillard, because 2 years ago, he was their first round pick, or 3 years ago, I should say. And he missed all of last year. And I really attributed that to a big reason why the Eagles struggled. And it may have been, but the Eagles, at least front office, maybe did not agree. There were a lot of reports that he was a huge trade chip this offseason. And if that's the case, I certainly don't think the Eagles have enough offensive line depth for them to be shopping their young talent. But if that is the case, there's obviously some doubt there. But I love the competition at that level. I mean, and to piggyback on the Nick Sirianni thing, I mean, this is a guy who apparently was having his draft prospects do rock or play him in rock, paper, scissors in their interviews. So, hey, if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. Bring on the competitiveness. We'll see how that goes. Coach Lupian, anything you got on the Eagles for us?
Yeah, as you two gentlemen mentioned, the lofty expectations on the offensive line. Let's not forget that this is a defensive line that was stout all season long and was probably considered the only positive, the only strength to last season's team. What they did collectively, man, they were. I've heard and I remember, watching the broadcast. This is a top 4 defensive line in the entire NFL, and the production says so. In regards to the offseason, it's going to be a whole lot easier transition in my mind now that a lot of the pieces that were, whether it's Doug Peterson or whether it's Carson Wentz or whether the GM did a great job of eliminating distractions moving forward, bringing in Sirianni to transition in with a guy like Jalen Hurts. So the GM did a great job of hiding behind those moves, you could say, or he did a great job of, just kind of masking them. And, it'll be an interesting transition from Peterson and the Wentz campaign to the Sirianni and First campaign. And it seems like that's a positive step because you don't have 2 warring factions in a locker room where everyone kind of starts off on a clean slate, so it'll be interesting. I think all that transition in the offseason is probably the reason why they're the cellar dwellers of the NFC East right now. And, Raider Jim penciled in the New York Giants in that spot. What it all comes down to is quarterback play. And between the 2 teams, there's a lot of expectations between the two teams' quarterbacks. So interesting to say the least. And again, we're less than a month away, so it's exciting time.
Amen. That's a perfect transition into the next team we will talk about is the New York Giants. At the very least, they are expected to finish 3rd in most, according to most books, in the futures odds, at least. According to Bovada, they are plus 400 or 4-1 to win the NFC East. It's obviously, you can talk about the quarterback play and obviously the return of Saquon Barkley. That's definitely going to be talked about. The one thing I want to bring up is a situation that has been early on in camp, or at least we've heard about it at the early stages of it, the Joe Judge situation. And this, whether it's coincidence, whether it's not, they had a situation where they either had 4 players retire in 3 days or 3 players retire in 4 days. One of those things, either they had a massive brawl at a mini camp or a training camp event or practice, to the point where apparently Joe Judge was just making the guys run and then just screaming obscenities at them. maybe that works in high school or college, but you're not going to do that to grown men. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand where you see some of these 30-year-olds that go, you know what, I got my pension. I don't need to be out here in the middle of August getting yelled at to go 4-12 or 4-13, whatever it equates to now. But I just wonder if that turns into something more come November, when they're in the middle of a 4 or 5 game losing streak, and maybe Joe Jed says something after a game or in the locker room, one way or another. But we'll go to Raider Jim to get us started on the New York Giants.
Yeah, on the Giants, last year they were the second worst offense as far as points go. They finished with an average of 17.5 points per game. And okay, Saquon Barkley may, but not much more than that. I really don't know how well their offensive line is going to play. You've got talk, and all the focus, it looks like, is going to be on Jason Garrett, the coordinator, and Daniel Jones, and what they can as the coach and quarterback combination. And quite honestly, I don't think it's going to be enough. I don't know. They're saying that Barkley, it's that good press stuff that you want to go out there. You don't want to tell your opponent, you don't want to tell your fan base that one of the most beloved players on the team just isn't 100%. So they keep saying, oh yeah, we think by game 1 he's going to be just fine. He's working out more. He's working, his progression seems right on track and maybe even a little ahead. But he's 100%. How big of a threat is the Giants offense going to be? Not going to be a threat, and the defense isn't going to keep them in the game. They did on the free agent market. They picked up Kenny Golladay, which is great. On the defensive side, they picked up Adoree Jackson. They have tight end Kyle Rudolph. They do have a few people, and then just the other day on the defense side, they also signed up Keon Crossan and Green Bay Packer former cornerback Jackson. So they're doing what they can. They're trying to fill in the blanks, if you will, but I don't think it is going to make the impact that they to not be the worst team in the NFC West. I just don't see them as a competitive threat. I still think the Eagles finish definitely above them, and when we get to talking about the Washington football team, it's going to be more competitive, I think, between Philadelphia and Washington, and the Giants are just going to be on the schedule for everybody.
Yeah, kind of that free space sometimes that you get them. But I'm glad you brought up the offensive line, because the one thing that I noticed going through this roster and looking, they're very similar to the Eagles. They're relying on a lot of youth. I believe it's Will Hernandez at 25 is going to be the oldest starter. And unless, look, I know Nate Solder's there, but with all due respect to Nate Solder, he's a little bit longer in the tooth. And, I don't think he's going to be out there for 95% of the offensive snaps. If he is, fantastic, but there's a lot of youth on that offensive line, which is fine unless you're in a division with guys like Brandon Graham, Chase Young, DeMarcus Lawrence, and really a lot of guys on the Cowboys. There are a lot of really good pass rushers. Montez Sweat in Washington is another guy who has a double-digit sack totals possibly in his future. So it's tough for that, but it compounds when you talk about the biggest, I guess, need for this team is to get Daniel Jones, as crazy as it is, kind of back to that rookie year. He was not bad in his rookie year. I think he was above average. I really enjoyed what he did last year, took a big step back, at least in protecting the football. I felt at the end of the year, they had a better chance. I think it was Colt McCoy who was on the team. I could be wrong, but I think it was Colt McCoy. And I remember saying, I do believe this team is better off with Colt McCoy. He's going to protect the football. Now, you can attribute that to the fact that, look, he didn't have Saquon Barkley, because Saquon Barkley makes everything easier for everyone. I look at Evan Ingram as one of the best, at the very least, one of the best red zone tight ends in all of football, and really one of the best overall tight ends, definitely a top 10 guy. Kenny Golladay is a good pickup in the offseason, but I don't know if he's number one, and I don't think Sterling Shepard is either. So they have problems there as well. I've always been a Leonard Williams fan, all the way since he was a USC Trojan. Fantastic tackle. Has kind of done both New York teams, got drafted by the Jets, traded to the Giants, had a breakout year, or at least a career year last year. Finally got to where people expected him to be, but it was that kind of dreaded contract year. So you wonder, what motivation does he have now? Well, he was franchise tagged by the Giants. So once again, he's in another contract year. Does he compound that again? But I agree with you, Raider Jim. I don't think there's nearly enough talent to get this done. And then, as I said, to compound the situation with the head coach, which I do believe at some point is going to rear its ugly head. Like I said, I don't believe you can be that, Bill Cowher, old school John Gruden, scream at guys on the sideline, dog guys on the sideline. I just don't think you can do that anymore, and keep the respect of your team unless you're winning championships. And the Giants are nowhere near doing that. So, Coach Lupian, what are your thoughts on the New York Giants?
Yeah, these guys are so sensitive nowadays. But, as we continue on talking about how their offensive line has to step up, and you go through that list of defensive players in the conference, I don't think you mentioned probably the best one, and maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But Chase Young on that Washington team is another guy that line's going to have to look to protect Daniel Jones. And if you mentioned Chase Young and I missed it, my bad. But yeah, this is a team that honestly I think has really mismanaged a guy like Saquon Barkley. For whatever reason, I have an eerie kind of feeling in their relationship, Barkley and the team. It seems like they're messing with him. They're trying to protect him after a bad year, and then he gets hurt and all this and he's coming into this offseason after surgery and hurt. I really think they've mismanaged this guy's talent. He came out of Penn State with a good character reputation, and sometimes I just see and I hear interviews with him and I just say, this guy doesn't want to play for this team. And it's unfortunate that a young player might have that kind of attitude so early in the season started. But again, I really think the Giants have dropped the ball on the most talented player on their roster. And it remains to be seen, but I do believe this is the cellar dwelling team of this conference, and there's a lot to build up from where they're at.
Yeah, I agree. And it's unfortunate, obviously you're not going to get too much pity from me, Giants fans or Giants at all. But obviously, you do talk about anyone, from Penn State, and yeah, you'll get a little bit of twinge from me. And I agree with you. It's always been kind of a fascination for me to see these college athletes who, let's face it, for their pretty much more than likely their entire athletic career, they've been at the very top. I'm sure in high school, Saquon Barkley was winning state championships or at least competing, 11-1, 10-2 seasons, things like that. And then obviously doing the same thing in college and then going to a franchise that, he hasn't sniffed the playoffs. Last year, technically they were still in the hunt, but that's only because of the division they were in. And he wasn't even a part of that run, if you will, or that race, which really wasn't. But he looks at it like Aaron Rodgers looks at the Packers' inability to, or in his mind, inability to bring in talent to help him. That's how running backs look at the offensive line acquisitions. And that really hasn't been the case, because I agree with you. I think Saquon Barkley is ready to get out of New York, or at the very least get away from the Giants' inability to really kind of put his wants, or at least his needs, first. You need to have an offensive line, or we will see what we saw last year from Saquon going down early happen again. It's an unfortunate sign, but the Giants have somewhat of a history of doing this of late. And their post Eli Manning Super Bowl days have been bleak and dark. And a lot of it is because of that. And I think Dave Gettleman is still there. Surprisingly, he's making Howie Roseman look pretty good right now. I think it is still Gettleman, but I could be wrong there. He might have finally got the axe in the last couple of years. But anyways, moving on to last year's defending champions, division champions. It's going to be an audio only podcast, but I did put those in air quotes because yes, someone had to win that dumpster fire of a division. I believe 6-9-1 got the job done last year. It was the Washington football team. And they come back with a lot of question marks, mainly as kind of the theme of this has been at the quarterback position. Ironically enough, there is only one quarterback on the active roster right now that was actually drafted, and it was Ryan Fitzpatrick, and he was a 7th round pick. So the quarterback position is a big, big issue for the Washington football team, but I do think that defense is very, very good and can get the job done. Ron Rivera as well is, one of my favorite coaches out there. The story itself, let alone what he has been able to do, with this young team. We'll see what they have left. But if there's one thing I will say about Fitzmagic, the show may come to town, but it will not last 17 weeks. This is a short engagement situation, a 3 to 5, maybe 6 week situation. And then it's going to putter out and you're going to see all the tricks exposed. But let's start with Coach Lupian first with the Washington football team. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, my sentiments exactly in regards to their head coach, Ron Rivera. Not only a really, really good, strong head coach, but high character individual. One of the things that I always known about him is he always holds his teams, his coaching staff, and himself at a high expectation and very holds them all accountable. And I think that's what's lacking in today's game is accountability. But not for him and his teams. He did it with a Carolina team. He did it last year with this Washington team. And, I'll probably be like out on a limb on this, but if the San Diego Chargers ever made one move and hired this guy, I think that vote for a stadium might have been a whole lot closer than what it was. And there might be a team still here. I'm not saying it's all on Ron, but Ron would have had that team going at a high level, and you just never know at that end. But he's in a better place now. This is a guy that beat cancer last year and made a run into the playoffs with an undrafted quarterback. And you're bringing up Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's a Band-Aid wherever he's gone, but he's been one of those waterproof, athletic, stretchy Band-Aids that doesn't necessarily pop off like on a cut or like on in rapid movement. So you've got this veteran that he has the name Fitzmagic for the obvious reasons. He pulls out victories, like a magician pulls a rabbit out of a hat. And then you got some really good defensive talent on this team, and you got a steady head coach that knows what he's doing, and they're going to be prepared. They're probably the best prepared team in this division. Mike McCarthy, I think, doesn't have anything on Ron Rivera. You got transition in Philly, and he has nothing on Ron Rivera. And then you already talked about the mess Judge has in New York. So, you look at those 4 teams and you look at who, out of all those head coaches, who's probably the most stable and who's probably the most savvy and the most prepared in himself. And then you filter that into the team. It's going to be Ron Rivera. So, this team's going to be ready from the start of week 1, regardless of what kind of Band-Aid they have at quarterback, because they have pretty good skill players on the offensive side, and they have a dynamic defense. So, when it comes to this Washington football team, I want to emphasize team because they're going to get the most out of each other playing as a team, not as like a franchise quarterback or a franchise running back in Barkley and probably the only returning quarterback in the division in a Daniel Jones because we still don't know what's up with Dak Prescott, and his injury problem. So, it collectively as a whole, I think there's no better team in this division. So, hopefully all those pieces could mesh and give it a go. Are they second in my mind? No. Are they second on paper? Yes. But you just never know what to expect from a Cowboys team because they're putting all their chips in on a Dak Prescott that I don't even think he's practicing right now. So collectively as the whole, Washington is the team in my mind to beat.
There, yeah. I do believe Dak is all ready to go. I think he did play in that Hall of Fame game. He's been playing a little sparingly. Green light so far, but I mean, anyone who saw that injury knows kind of how freakish it was. The way he plays, it could happen again. Something else could happen. It's unfortunate because I think even the most diehard Washingtonian, whatever, Washington football team fan will tell you that if Dak Prescott is healthy last year, the Washington football team does not win that division. I think that is an admission I think any football team fan would make. It is interesting too. This will be the final year of kind of the football team moniker. They have announced that next year they'll actually change up they'll actually announce one there. It's down to, they're very weird. They had 8 names that they were between, and then they released 3 possible logos, but didn't release any names with them. I don't know. They're trying to get the kids these days, and I don't get it. But anyways, they will be the football team for at least one more year. And I think they're going to be a pretty darn good football team, but they definitely have to get that quarterback situation figured out as well, as you talked about, Coach. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on the Washington football team?
Yeah, I think we all have a consensus on Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera is the player coach. Ron Rivera is a coach's coach. He is a man who leads by example. And what do you say about the Redskins? We can all kind of like smile. They were the division winners last year. They had a head coach with cancer. They had quarterbacks that were just getting fed to the lions at times. Like not because of poor play by the offensive line, but just by virtue of injury. And yet they persevered and played through it. And that is because of a Ron Rivera leading the team. So give the guy a clean slate, get COVID out of the air as much as possible, give him an entire season, give him a solid quarterback back there, and you might see this Washington team do some pretty surprising things. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, you already touched on it. It's Ryan Fitzpatrick. And again, my theme of the offensive line, they brought in Eric Flowers. They did lose Morgan Moses, the left tackle, but I think they're going to be fine. One of the best moves that Washington made last year was somewhere along the way, they decided to put Cornelius Lucas and Wes Schweitzer into the starting left side of the line, guard and tackle. And when that happened, all of a sudden, Antonio Gibson started running like a maniac, had some of his best games when they solidified that left side of the line. So you got a solid left side. They're going to protect the quarterback's back. If they can get some timing out there, they're also brought in Curtis Samuel. They got Adam Humphreys and a rookie, Dione Brown. This is going to be a good team. I think that they're going to be pretty okay on the offensive side of the ball. Montez leading the linebacking core and the defense. This is just going to be a good team. I think they're going to be better than some people might give them credit for being, just by virtue of what a mess 2020 was. And it's kind of hard to not look back at the teams that had marginal seasons in 2020 and forget that it was COVID and no fans and everything else. The psychological stuff that I don't care what anybody tells you was a psychological drain on a lot of people and challenge. So wipe the slate clean. Let's get out there. Let's see what Washington does. But I think they're going to be pretty darn good.
I agree with what you kind of talked about, like the mental side of things, because obviously, look, I don't know if we're ever going back to normal 2019 normal, 2018 normal. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. But last year was pretty much an entire offseason of what we're doing right here, essentially a Zoom meeting. That's how they're meeting their coaches. That's how they're meeting their new teammates. And this year, not so much. It's been obviously more opened up, but even in those situations, when there are those Zoom meetings, those meetings over that, they're at least, wait, we've done this before, been there, done that. It's a little more, I guess, uncomfortable comfort level, because it's not ideal, but you at least know how to deal with the unideal. So that's the situation. And obviously, all the storylines with Washington last year, I think, unless you were, obviously I wanted the Eagles to win the division. I think any of the other two teams, the New York and Cowboy fans as well, wanted their individual teams to win it. But if it wasn't going to be our team, I think everybody else in the around football wanted it to be the feel-good story football team. And it was a great story. And I firmly I stand by it that that Washington team played the Buccaneers the toughest in that entire playoffs. They actually had a lead on the Buccaneers, I believe, either late in the third quarter or early fourth quarter. And obviously it didn't end that way, but so it just kind of tells you that, Ron Rivera is going to get the most out of everyone. And that is something you need as an NFL head coach, because the team that starts week 1 is going to look a lot different come week 17. So you're going to have to find those parts, figure out ways to make that work. And that's what he did, obviously, fantastically last year. Hopefully he won't have to deal with that much turnover, especially because, there's not a whole lot of margin at the top. Now, Antonio Gibson, the running back, I think a really, really solid runner. I just don't know if he's that guy that can fully take on the load and be that kind of workhorse for a game managing team. And this is going to sound crazy, but I really think there are going to be 1 or 2 games where Tress Way is going to win the game. And Tress Way, of course, is the punter for the Washington football team. He's one of the best punters in football. And obviously, you can kind of roll your eyes or scoff at that. But this is a team that I think field position will be very key. You're going to see defensive touchdowns from this team. You're going to see this team cause turnovers that allow their offense shorter fields. When you can do that from the 5-yard line as opposed to the 20, those turn into from field goals into defensive touchdowns. Putting them in deep, Tress Way is one of the best coffin corner kickers or punters out there. I don't know if they still use that term, but that's what I remember it as. And it's going to be interesting because that's how they're going to have to win. They're not going to blow you away. They're not going to win those massive games. You got scary Terry McLaurin, but I don't, like I said, I don't know if Fitzmagic will be able to throw those bombs 17 games this season. So they're going to have to get a little, magical with it, even without Fitzmagic. But now we move on to what most websites, or actually pretty much all of them, believe will be the winner in the NFC East. It is my hated Dallas Cowboys, and most likely, if you're not a Cowboy fan, you probably hate the Cowboys. There are not too many people who are neutral on the Cowboys. But anyways, it is the Cowboys who, I have to admit, look, this team from top to bottom, and as Coach kind of pointed out, outside of coaching, I think the Cowboys have the tops in pretty much every other category out there. Definitely best offensive line. I think when Dak is ready to be at 100% or even 80%, I think he is the best quarterback out there. Ezekiel Elliott's maybe not been the same production of a couple years back, but he's still pretty much at the top of this division. And the defense, that front seven is still really good. Somehow, some way, they always seem to find absolute studs in the second and third round that just absolute fall to them. This year, unfortunately, if you listen to our podcast during the offseason where we talked about the draft and the linebackers, notably, I was very high on Micah Parsons. Well, guess what? Now I get to go up against him twice a year, and he gets to play wearing that star on his cap. But we'll start with Raider Jim. What are your thoughts on the Dallas Cowboys?
Well, I think you already touched base, or we all touched base a little earlier on Dak Prescott is 100%. And I go back to, you can say somebody's 100%, but 100% of what? He's 100% of a guy who had a very, very bad injury. So 100% now, does that mean he's only 90% of what he was prior to the injury? And that's going to be the key. Here's what we've got against that. It's not so much that he doesn't have a great line in front of him, because he does, but how good is that defense going to be? They're stout, they're strong, but are they going to keep other offenses off the field? And if that's not the case, then that means that the Cowboy offense is going to have to be out on the field for longer times, for an extended week, because of the extra game of the season, and that's going to take a toll. He's got a great receiving core. He's got good targets. Ezekiel Elliott, if I'm not mistaken, had the worst season that he has had last year, or least productive, I should say. I shouldn't use the word. So is it time that Tony Pollard's going to get more touches? And is Ezekiel Elliott he's still there. He's still great. And he's going to be the starter. But how effective is he going to be? So we'll see what happens. They did pick up on the defensive side of the ball. They picked up Keanu Neal, who's a great addition to anybody's secondary. So that's going to be good. But I'm just kind of curious to see what's really going to happen. As I alluded to, how good is the defense as far as keeping the offense off the field so they can get their breathers in and stretch out. They brought in Brent Urban, edge rusher Terrell Basham. That is supposed to be an upgrade for the front seven, but we'll just have to wait and see. I don't think the team is solid on the offensive side. It's what is their productivity really going to be because of the injury, because of just minor changes that have been made throughout. And again, where is Dak Prescott really at with his recovery?
I agree. I think for the Cowboys, the biggest question mark will not be who's playing week 3, week 4. It will be who's playing week 14, week 15, week 17, because that's always been the biggest thing with the Cowboys, whether it's injuries, whether it's off the field issues that turn into suspensions or question marks, whatever it is, you can pretty much bet there's going to be some sort of drama in Dallas. I mean, it was before my time, but I'm pretty sure one of the most famous soap operas was named Dallas. So, it kind of works out, right? But anyways, we'll pass it over. Coach Lupian, what are your thoughts on the Dallas Cowboys?
The first thing that came to mind is Aaron Rodgers, because when Mike McCarthy was out the door in Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers alluded to, the Mark McCarthy way and whatever. And it remains to be seen if there's anything to draw from. If Mike McCarthy is the old Mike McCarthy from Green Bay, I think the entire league has the blueprint on what to expect from him. But if he's a new Mike McCarthy, then the league's in trouble, and Dallas on paper with all that talent should win this division. So who knows? But Dak's coming back from a horrible injury, and like Raider Jim alluded to, what do you get? You get a 90% of what Dak used to be. But there's still a lot of talent on this roster. Ezekiel Elliott is coming off an off season, and there's high expectations for him to rebound this season. And he's probably had the most quietest off season so far in his career, because there's always been something with Ezekiel, whether it's a harassment allegation or whether it's some kind of law trouble, and you haven't heard much. So maybe he's coming in focused and ready to roll for his career, hopefully. But for this team, I don't think Mike McCarthy is the head coach the top head coach in this division. I already mentioned Ron Rivera. We don't know what to expect from Dak and his, he maybe he doesn't stand in the pocket. Maybe he doesn't run out of the pocket. We just don't know what to expect right now. And then, yeah. So, my thing with Dallas is I don't have much on Dallas because they're not a team that interests me at all, like some of these other teams in this division.
Yeah, it's interesting because they just always kind of seem to be that team. It's kind of like a puffer fish, right? And when it gets threatened, it puffs out and it looks really tough. But all you got to do is just get around those little spikes, and it's just a little fish. Then it just whatever. It's just kind of like what that is, because you look up and down this roster, and it's hard to figure that how is anybody going to compete with these guys, and it's pretty much the same roster from last year. And I understand that Dak Prescott went down, but Andy Dalton was there, and I know we're not talking about the Red Rocket of 2012, or he's a little bit longer in the tooth, but I mean the Washington football team won the division with the guy who almost had his leg amputated three years ago, and a guy who was taking college, finals up until the end of the regular season. So how does that happen? I agree with you. I think Mike McCarthy is another one of those guys where you just ask the question of, is he a good coach, or was he a coach who had a fantastic quarterback? And that's always a question you have to ask, because if you have a fantastic quarterback, the worst coach in the league can go 8-8. Norv Turner made it to an AFC championship game, folks, with a above average quarterback, or, maybe really good quarterback, however you want to look at it, with Phillip Rivers. All right. So if you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, a lot of your faults are going to be kind of glossed over. And I don't think Dak is there. I don't think this team is as good as some of those Packers teams were, or at least the one notable, of course, that won the World Championship, Super Bowl. I know it was against Pittsburgh, but whichever number that was. So there's just a lot of question marks with Dallas. Like I said, they're that bully on the street that beats up on the little kids, but then once someone pops him upside the head, he goes running to mom and crying about this and that. That's just what I feel with the Cowboys. And I'll be the first one to admit I'm probably incredibly biased. Very few things put me into a rage seeing, driving down the freeway and seeing those stickers, or, the star sticker, more than likely getting cut off, and it's probably an F-150. But anyways, it's a situation where I wish nothing but bad towards this franchise on the football field, nothing, personal. And I will say Dak Prescott, he's a fantastic human being. Once again, the only fault I have in him is the jersey he puts on. And for me, it's a pretty big fault, but still, I can root for him as much as I can root for any Cowboy player. But as an unbiased bettor, as an unbiased fan, you just look at it and it's hard to get away from this team. I just wish Washington had a more reliable quarterback situation, because if Washington had a more reliable quarterback situation, even if it was just even if Alex Smith was just still there, or just another backup, Andy Dalton or something like that, I'm not sure. It's just tough for me to believe that Ryan Fitzpatrick or Taylor Heineke can win a division a second year in a row. But we'll see. I know I'm pulling for the Eagles, obviously, but if it can't be the Eagles, at least let it be Washington, because I don't want it to be the Cowboys. But it's going to be tough. I think it's going to come down to those two teams. Even best case scenario for the Eagles, I think it would be a 9-8, which will probably get you second place in this division. And I do think this division will be better. I hope that the division winner out of this will not be. It was just a weird situation last year. Don't really know why. Let's be honest. Don't really know why it was. But and plus the fact that this whole division gets 4 cracks at the Chargers, so that's 4 hopeful wins right there. But anyways, another cheap shot I threw there. We'll get final thoughts. We'll start with you, Mr. Martinez.
Oh, it's just another great wrap up for another great division. And we're only, like I say, what, 3-4 weeks away from the opening of the season. And we haven't done. I know we're going to get closer and closer to talking about the AFC West.
Yep. I believe actually AFC West will be next week. So we'll be able to dive into that. Obviously, big question mark. Can anyone bring down the Chiefs? And if so, who will it be? Because I think, I don't know, I'll get to it obviously next week, but I think I'm a lot higher on Drew Lock than most people. So, I think it will be a bit of a race for second place, but that will be a hell of a race, obviously. Coach Lupian, final thoughts here for another fantastic episode of the NFL Weekly.
Well, you had to mention Drew Lock, but, I got high hopes for my guy Teddy B as well. Let's not forget that that's a Denver team that acquired him. So, but as far as today goes, gentlemen, another wonderful show, another week ahead of the season approaching, and it's always a good time to spend it with you guys in commute home.
Amen. Another fantastic, as you said, summer day, beautiful here in San Diego. It was bearable for us fair weather folks. It can't be too hot, can't be too cold. Today was just right. I think it was maybe got up to 88, but it was a beautiful maybe 80, 85 if you were around San Diego. And everyone else, you can stop flipping me off if you don't live in San Diego. It's unfortunate, but feel free. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun as we get closer. Next week will, of course, be the AFC West. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll wrap it up with at least wrap up the previews edition of this as we dive into the season. It will be the NFC South, where we get to kind of see what goes on.
Dirty.
Defending, yep, defending Super Bowl champs claim. And then I know Coach Lupian will have plenty to go over with his Saints. But thank you all so much for listening to this week's edition of the NFL Weekly, presented by the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. It is time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. We'll talk to you all very soon. Take care.